And, oh, no, undo. Sorry, it was in the middle of something else. You came back earlier than I expected. Okay. All right, so hopefully I'm sharing my slide. Let me know if this,
yes.
if you see cats.
Yes, I see your cat and I see you. Or cat, sorry, I didn't see the one in the back there.
Yeah, the one in the back's having the best time. The one in the front's not doing so good. So yes, so we thought it would be fun to just kind of go through a couple of interesting things you can do inside Webi if you're in the HTML option. There's a lot of things that you can do with that. So, and some things people don't think about. So I wanted to basically cover some of that. And the idea is on any cell within Business Objects, you can right click, and by default it's set as at text, but you can tell it to read in another format. And so for instance, if you told it to read the text that's in that cell as HTML, then you can do a lot with that HTML, including adding JavaScript and other things that can make it kind of active. So, so that's kind of what I want to cover. One of the things about that is that in 4, when so this has been around for a while, but they added in a little bit of security on this, because obviously if you're public facing, you may not want JavaScript to be running. So you know there's a certain amount of security with depending on what you want to be able to do. So there's different levels of HTML allowance now. It used to be wide open, but now it's much more, there's different levels. And you have to go into Webi and say, you know, okay, I'm going to allow this, or I'm going to allow this. And the two options are, you know, you can either allow nothing, or you can allow HTML tags that you specify. So you can go into those, the screen to specify them, and you say, these HTML tags I'm allowing. Or, and then the last one is kind of wide open, allowing the JavaScript. That looks like, from an administrative standpoint, this is kind of something that the administrative would do on the environment as a whole. This isn't something you can do on an individual document. This is something the admin would do. They'd go into the Webi properties under applications and enter the JavaScript area. They could either set it to disable everything, or enable only HTML elements we specify, or enable, you know, all hyperlinks, JavaScript, and HTML elements. So, so that's how that's set. In this case, I've kind of made it wide open to be able to do everything that I'm going to show you. But I'm going to go into this ability to authorize the HTML elements first, real quick, just so you have an idea. So for the first example I'm going to do is show you a marquee, so you can have something running across the screen in terms of HTML. And in order to enable the marquee element, of course, you'd have that second option checked, but then you'd also have to enter in the marquee element as authorized. And within each HTML element, there are certain attributes. And so you can specify, in addition to the actual HTML tag, you can specify which attributes are allowed. So for example, to just take a look at this. So I've done this, of course, in our environment to show you. Oh, geez. Let me just avoid that and go directly. That's taking way too long. Come on up. Okay, so here's the marquee. You can see it's slowly going across the screen. I think, is Minith running that regression testing? So it's running across the screen here. And, you know, it's not performing well right now. For some reason, there's some probably load on the server. I don't know. So my connection may be disability-wise because I'm in the middle of the Oregon fires right now. I'm surrounded, so I've been power off and on, so bear with me. a little bit. I think it's my internet that's probably the problem. So hopefully we'll be okay. But if I'm in design and I'm looking at this cell, you'll see that there's the marquee tag here and it's set to stop and start depending on the mouse stop and start thing. And I can put in the script that I want. And if I go in behind that to format cell, you see that it's set to HTML. So because I've enabled that script, I can have that set and then I've clicked on it. So on mouse down it stops. But that's the idea of the marquee, to enable something like that running in the background. Sorry, resume, please. Okay. Okay, so I think I clicked on the wrong one. So the next example I want to give you is the IFrame container. And what's really cool about this piece is the IFrame can allow you to embed a HTML5 dashboard that's somewhere else. So you've got some dashboard somewhere that you want to then input into a Webi report so that your users, when they're using Webi, they can just click on a tab and they've got their dashboard there. And it's interactive within Webi because it's HTML. So you can put an iframe in there and it can come up. That is the iframe tag. You set it as HTML. And you might set the iframe tag to be a certain height and width. This is really helpful for things like, mobile displays and things like that. And then you can have a frame and all those kinds of things. But it is fully functionally interactive. Let me go back.
Hey, Amy.
Yes.
Someone is asking if you could please provide the formula of the marquee you just showed.
Yes, on the marquee, do I have it in here? I will, when we post these, I'll put the formula in the PowerPoint. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so the squirrel dashboard in iframe, so luckily I've got that formula already there. So let's check my link out. Let's see, this one works this time. So this one is the iframe HTML5, and it's pointing out to a totally other location where this dashboard is located. And if you look, and it's kind of, I've got it kind of a little too large. Baton Rouge is here, and I've selected this. So it's fully interactive. If I click over on the Colorado, it's switching this to Colorado. If I click up to Washington, it switches up to King County and so forth. So this is a dashboard inside your Webi document that is just a dashboard somewhere else. And it's HTML5. You may hear a little bit about our Squirrel application that can produce HTML5 dashboards. So, so if you look on the cell, the formula of the cell, you see it's just an iframe pointing to that source location. So it's out on our development or our demo server, and it's pointing to the dashboard out there. So again, this is one of those things that you'd have to enable it to be able to show. So you'd have to have it enabled, but once you have it enabled, you can iframe to anything. What's really helpful here is things like input screens on other applications that you have that feed your your Webi documents or something like that. I've seen a lot of people use it that way. So it's the idea is your applications aren't standing alone; they are working with other applications. So so that the iframe is kind of a special option. Okay, so same thing with a app out to like our InfoBurst apps folder has a variety of different, in InfoBurst, we have a variety of dashboards that are HTML5, same concept. So I'll just move on, but there's lots of different options for HTML5 dashboards, but it's, you can iframe out to them. Okay, so another option with HTML is the option of doing some styles. So you can, instead of having a square, element link on your Webi report, you can make it look like a button. And you can do that with styles. And so the idea here is I have, a style that's rounded, it's got a little radius, it's got certain colors, and I've got different kinds of buttons. So I'm calling them by, if I've got a button that's just button, if I call it by button, it looks like this. And if I call it by button 1, it looks like this, and so forth. So, so I can have this style as a descriptor in a cell in the header that's kind of hidden. It's just a descriptor that I've set as HTML, and then I can use it throughout my tab, my report tab. You have to put it on every report tab, on every header of every report tab, or it doesn't have to be in header. It can be anywhere on the report tab. I just where I put it usually is in the header, and it doesn't show, but it's actually affecting any other cell that calls out these button 1, button 2, button, etc. So if you want to take a look at that. So for example, the example I have is it's calling button 2. And so it's got the look and style feel of that button 2. And I've set it up, this is just a table if you think about it, but it has the look of, buttons. And so I can use it as buttons using element linking. So for example, so the button script, I actually highlighted it here so I'd know where that cell was, but usually I just make it white. But I can click, for instance, on here, and using element linking, it's showing me a different table or a different chart. So I can, I can switch to a different, I didn't have that one set up. Oh, there goes East Coast and then South America, etc. So I can, I can set up button-like things. So if I look at the script here behind this cell, you see it's got the button script that I had. And if you look behind this cell, and then look at this cell, you can see it's calling button 2, just for that style, look, and feel. So that's another thing that you can do with HTML, is you can give your different features on your screen a style. This method, by the way, of making these buttons actually click an element link to show and hide a table or chart uses that reference cell that Michael was pointing out. So there's a methodology behind showing and hiding on your screen with what look like buttons but are just element links on a table. So anyway. Another thing that you can do is add scripts for a timer. This actually came from a blog that somebody had written, and I should give them credit for that, but I didn't, but you can look it up. And so it's just basically client-side JavaScript. When you set it, you do have to set the document to refresh, to automatically refresh, and then this will time that automatic refresh. So if you've got a dashboard that you want to periodically refresh the background of the data, like if you've got something up on a screen, then this is the kind of thing you might use. There's actually this was sort of, a workaround functionality that we used with the regular Webi, but now that there's the Fiori actually has this built in. So this is so you don't have to use that script, it's already part of it. And you would go into the Fiori screen and you'd go into auto refresh mode, and there's an option of how often you would refresh it. So probably you'd want to look at both options to see, how you'd want to display, whether or not you want to display in the regular Webi window or the Fiori window, to see which way you want to do it. But you can do either. One uses the script and one uses the built-in auto refresh. And the Fiori, by the way, also has some chart animation functionality, which I think is kind of additional scripting that you can do with Fiori, or not scripting, but that functionality that you can do with Fiori. But you can do some automations with the regular Webi as well using scripting. So that's another functionality. And in fact, we do that with the next example. So the next thing I want to show you is scalar vector graphics. So with SVGs, you basically have images that are coded or text. So they when you look at the cell behind them, it's just words. So you can manipulate that, and that's the key, is that you can then animate those images or with manipulation or with and the other piece of it is that you can grow or shrink and grow them, and they still look the same. They still pixel perfect, as opposed to looking very pixelated when you grow them. So SVGs have been around forever. Lots of support for them in all, in browsers and stuff. There's lots of support going on with them. But the idea is that you can do things like animating with them. So in this example, I have an image. Kind of saw that at the very beginning, but I have an image that I've set up with some JavaScript on it, and it just rotates the little eye patch on it as an example. So again, SVGs are, as opposed to your raster type of pixelation. When you grow it, it's a code behind it, so it's vector. So when you grow it, it just regenerates that visual using the code, so it doesn't get pixelated. So I've included the code behind the a copy paste of the SVG, and then I threw in this little animation piece of saying every second rotate it 0 degrees from 0 to 6 degrees back to 0. So it goes back and forth. So this is the idea, is that you can add these little manipulations into an image. And SVGs are available online everywhere. You can copy paste. It's that kind of simplicity. But you can also create them with something like Inkspace or a lot of different functionality options or different tools out there. One of the things that I think SVGs is especially good at is for custom mapping. And I'm going to get to Google mapping in a second, because certainly that's a HTML piece, but so linking to Google Maps. For custom maps, let's say you've got a mall, and you want people to be able to click on each section of the mall. Like this is, RC Wiley, and there might be JC Penney's and whatever, you want them to H&M. This is very small, but that's an H&M. So you want them to be able to click on this little thing and then maybe see the data for that store. So this would be a custom, map type of functionality. And so as opposed to like a Google map. So with making it or having it as an SVG file, then you can take each of these sections, and they can each be their own thing, and you can click on them, and they can result in some element linking or some change. And within Webi, you can actually go both from a map, from this kind of image to your other data, or you can go from your data to the image. So you can send data back and forth with an on-click. You can send data, or you can element link over to the map. So both directions is possible. So you see, for example, this on-click, and the example that I'm going to give you is just a simple on-click. It just changes color, but you could potentially on-click do something, right, with the whatever scripting you have. So if you look at this one, oh good, it's already, I kept my session, so happy. So if I click on the blue, it turns to black. If I click on this one, this turns to black, and this one goes back to red or back to blue, and I can set the reset. So that the idea is there's an on-click change. Similarly, I can, if I have, going to input controls, I've got Oregon, so on this custom map, if you think of it as an image, and I switch over to Arizona, the color changes. So that's the idea, that you can go either direction. You can either go with something where you affect the image, or you affect the data, and either way, something can happen. So that's the idea behind that. If you look at the data here, you've just got a formula, and again, it's set as HTML. So there's this SVG tag, and it's set as HTML. So pretty, oops, cancel, come on, please. Okay, so if I look, expand this a little bit, let me just open it in formula. You can see that there's, if the employee state is this, then this. So this is very simplified, but that's the idea, is you can have things change back and forth. And if you have an interest in custom mapping, want to get into this more, this is just an introduction, so we can always connect again. Okay, so another thing about Webi that a lot of people don't know about is the Cascade style sheets. This can be done at the document level. And this comes into play for us most often when we want to, when we're trying to do a Webi dashboard that is where there's hyperlinks. Because hyperlinks are always by default going to be blue, text, and underlined, and we don't necessarily want that. So, so we'll often change the style using Cascade styling sheets in the Webi document. But there is a enterprise-wide style sheet that basically you can have the administrator change defaults. So you can have this, what's most commonly done with this is, instead of A4 printing on an A4, by default, it would print to letter, for instance, for page size. So that's what's most commonly done at the environment level. But you can do a lot of things with that. But you can also do it at the document level. So if you go into document summary and you go into edit, you can click on the button that's change default style. You can export the style sheet, and it exports this text file that has a bunch of different settings. That's the defaults. And then you can change it, and then you can import it back in. So just the file and import it back in. And that's how you change the document level style. So one things that this is done with is things like changing the overall font. So there's different sections of the Webi CSS. There's the font section, the report section. So you can say, change some things like the printing size, printing page size. You can say on reports, you can say all the headers are a certain thing, or the footers are a certain thing. There's a WOB, which is the cells basically. And you can go into individual cells and say, if they're report comments, they look like this style, etc. So, so there's lots you can do with styles at the document level. Like I mentioned, what we most often do is add in hyperlink coloring so that our dashboards so that any hyperlinks don't have just blue and underlined. And you can have it at different levels, like a different hyperlink color at the header or a different hyperlink color at the footer, et cetera, from the different sections. Conceivably, you could put in the animation logo that we showed you earlier. So this is just to note that Crystal also has the option of a Cascade style sheet. So if you're a Crystal person, you can do the same thing. Okay, so let's talk about Google Mapping. So Google Mapping, there's different types of APIs, and there's different syntax for different ways of using those APIs. So there's an older syntax for where you put in whatever your API is. There's syntax for what zoom level. So if you're looking at the world versus the state versus the city, you'd have a different zoom level. And then there's the information, the different syntax for the information you're going to pass in. And so depending on what you have, if you have latitude and longitude, that's great, because that gets very specific. But if you just have, a street name, that can work as well, as long as you have the licensing for sending that information. The key thing about, I'm going to show you the example in just a second, but the key thing about Google Mapping links is that if you're going to use Google Mapping, it's one at a time. You can go up to 10 with directions, with the direction API, because you can go from direct point to point to point, and you can go up to 10 points. So you could actually display 10 points in that scenario. But really, if you go beyond like one, if you're wanting to display more than 1 point at a time, you know, many different points on a map, you're going to want to use something like Need4Viz for mapping, or some of the third-party options, which I'm going to show you soon. So let me just really quick, since we're getting close to time, I want to go back. You can also put this into an IDT object, or and have it be something that when the user chooses that object, it's ready to go, and then you can, you know, you set it as HTML on the object itself. So, for example, I have the state of Washington. If I click on Colorado, I go to Colorado. I can, you know, clear the filter, and I can go to Oregon, etc. So that's how you would use sort of Google mapping. This cell here has the link to display it in it. So that's the link, and it shows a default, and it says if counts less than 1 or greater than 1, then show this one. So that's how I showed my default. Same thing, you can go to the city level. So if I click on Portland, you see a different level. And then you can even go down to, because it's Google mapping, you can go down to street. So I can, for instance, click on Indian School Road in Arizona and see that. So you can also pass, those are things that where you can pass the state or the city or the street, but you can also pass latitude and longitude. So I can open a map that on a different tab. So for instance, if I do open map here, it opens a different tab that opens it in Google. This doesn't require the that you have a licensed API. If it opens a different map, it's all being rendered within Google, so it's okay with that. So that's the idea. If you do it that direction, it's only when you're embedding it that you need to. But like I said, for let me go back into here. For for anything more than Google Map, a single point, you would need a third-party product, and eventually this is going to let me click on it. Come on. Just a second. There we go. Oh, please. Okay, so I've just got an example of the Need4Viz maps. So there's lots of functionality in the Need4Viz. It's its own demo. And it's coming up. Come on. May not have access to that. Okay, hold on. I don't know why this isn't coming up. I'll give it some time. I think it's just waiting. Yeah, so I'll come back to this. But basically a third-party tool will do the additional, if you want it more than 1 point. So that's using custom elements. So custom elements are their own thing. I'm going to see if I add this. Something's not coming up, but So if I add insert a custom element here, there's all sorts of need for viz ones, but with maps, you can use latitude and longitude map, and you can put it, and it would give you many different points on the thing. You can see this, for example, this visually is pretty easy to see. You can get a heat map of multiple points on a single. So my point here is that with custom element, you need a custom element, and custom elements have additional code that you'd put in for them to be used. And so there's third-party tools for that. Need for Viz is one of the best ones. There's also other options, or you can write your own. So that then go out using the Google Maps API. You can go out to Google and use that functionality and interact with the data that you have in your Webby document. But there's tons of stuff on that that is just, really is its own demo. I'm going to go back to this because I think something's not linking on that. So with Google Mapping, there's lots of information that I provided in this. There is the embed API for that, and there's a drive time. So if you've got a situation where you want to know how long it takes to drive from one point to another on a map, that's kind of an interesting one. We've used that for construction sites, for the construction workers getting to the sites, how long it takes them to drive there on average. Things like that. So I just wanted to bring in some more. Like I said, this is a gazillion. There's lots more out there that's available with this. So for example, there in Google Buddies, there's the option of putting in a QR code. You can use the same thing with barcodes. You can use fonts for that. So I put that information in because that's using the HTML functionality. One of the things that I do a lot is I'll go out to this site. So this is kind of my favorite site, is this W3 Schools, because they'll have the little try it, they'll have the script, and I just have to manipulate the script to make it do what I want. So I'm all about using what other people have. So for example, they've got the options of the different scripts, and you can see what it looks like. So kind of a neat function, and I wanted to add that in there. And if you're going to go beyond that with your dashboards, not just Google Maps, but if you start to get into different functionalities of charts and if you start to make more than one or two dashboards with Webby, you really should look into Need for Viz. Need for Viz not only is going to allow you to, and I'm not connecting well, I think, to their server. So, but Need for Viz is going to allow you to show some of it. Is going to allow you to actually see. So you've got, like, if I was connecting well, I don't, but you've got all sorts of different chart types. You've got this packing chart that's really cool. With the tables, you can actually drill into the tables and show, so on a dashboard, when you're wanting to use very little space, you can drill in and make it go, down a hierarchy into one space, as opposed to, pointing to another tab or something like that to get your detail. So, I mean, when you really start to make dashboards with Webby, looking into this third-party option is huge. It's going to really make a big difference for you. And I think it would be good for us to do a separate demo on that, because there's lots of stuff with the, I'm just not connecting to the Need for Viz for some reason. I don't know why. So anyway, I think I'm at my end. I kind of went over. I knew I was going to. I was trying to rush through as fast as I could. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Amy. Oh. Go ahead, Paul. I think I spoke over you.
No, not at all.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, I think we lost Paul. Well, thank you, Amy, for that session. Someone was asking if you can provide the code for the SVG, CSS, and Google mapping in your slides as well, so that when we share them, they can have them in there to reference to.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just go through and make sure that the code is all there, because I know it looked like the marquee I hadn't had the code in there, but I'll make sure that it's all there.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it, think you'll use it the way you use it, but there's tons of options for that. Just a fantastic, things are moving in that direction as far as Webi is not just for corporate reporting anymore.